job listing said evening custodial maintenance, which is the kind of phrase designed to sound more dignified than what it actually is. I answered it in October, when I was 3 weeks out from my last position and had stopped pretending I was being selective. The HR coordinator at Hargrove Regional High School was a woman named Denise who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and processed my application with the efficient warmth of someone who had processed 10,000 applications before mine and expected to process 10,000 more after. She told me the hours were 5 in the evening until 2 in the morning, Tuesday through Saturday. She told me the facility was large 3 buildings connected by covered walkways built across 3 different decades, which explained why the floor plans didn't fully agree with each other. She told me I'd be working mostly alone, with a second custodian named Gerald, who covered the gymnasium wing and typically left by 10. She did not tell me about the PA system. I don't hold that against her now, though I did for a while. I think she genuinely didn't consider it worth mentioning. Some things, when you've worked inside them long enough, stop registering as unusual. They become part of the building the way the ventilation hum becomes part of the building, not background noise so much as structural sound, the sound of the place being what it is. You stop hearing it. I imagine Denise stopped hearing the PA system years ago, the way I used to stop hearing the elevated train that ran behind my apartment on Fulton Street. You adapt. The human brain is extraordinarily good at deciding certain sounds simply do not require a response. I started on a Thursday. My first 4 nights were unremarkable in the way first nights tend to be overwhelming in their procedural detail, exhausting in the physical sense, quietly lonely in the emotional sense that I'd been expecting and had more or less accepted as the condition of the work. I learned the building. I learned which hallways the mop cart wheels would catch on, which bathroom tiles were cracked and required careful mopping around, which stretches of corridor the fluorescent lights would flicker in regardless of how recently the ballast had been replaced. I learned that the B-wing smelled faintly of mildew behind the science rooms, a smell old enough to be structural, embedded in the drywall the way old houses hold the smell of the people who lived in them. I learned that the trophy case near the main office had a reflection problem. When you walked past it at the right angle, the glass threw your image back at you in a way that looked, for just a fraction of a second, like someone standing inside the case. I learned to walk past it without looking. Gerald was a compact man in his mid-50s who communicated primarily in nods and had been working the gymnasium wing for 11 years. On my second night, he offered me half a ham sandwich from a cooler he kept under the utility sink, which I accepted, and that was the most sustained interaction we ever had. He finished by 10, locked his cart in the gym storage room, and left through the east entrance. By 10:15 each night, I was functionally alone in the building. I want to be precise about what that feels like, because I think most people who haven't worked overnight in an institutional building underestimate the specific quality of that aloneness. It's not like being alone in your apartment, which is an aloneness scaled to human dimensions. 4 walls you chose, furniture you recognize, a refrigerator that cycles on and off with a sound you've catalogued. Institutional aloneness is different in scale. The building continues to operate around you, the ventilation system, The climate controls, the security lighting on timers, the exit signs burning their red perpetual signal, and you are a single warm body moving through all of that operational indifference. The building is not hostile. That's what I want to be precise about. It is simply not aware of you. You are maintenance in every sense of the word. You are there to preserve a system designed for other people who will arrive in the morning and leave in the afternoon and not think about what happens in between. That specific quality of invisibility has its own weight. After a few weeks of it, you start to feel slightly translucent. Not in a dramatic way, just a gradual erosion of the sense that your presence matters. You do the work. The floors are clean. Nobody says anything. You do the work again. The PA system first spoke to me on my 5th night, which was a Monday. I'd picked up an extra shift to cover for a sick call. It was 11:47. I was mopping the C-wing corridor, the one that runs along the back of the building where the older classrooms are, the ones with the original chalkboards and the desks that still had the little attached writing surfaces that flip up from the side. I'd been thinking about nothing in particular. That's the other thing about the work. It creates a specific mental state that isn't sleep and isn't fully wakefulness. Your body moves through its practice routine and your mind goes somewhere loosely adjacent to consciousness, a kind of supervised drifting. I was in that state when the intercom clicked on. It was a sound I recognized immediately as institutional, that specific pre-announcement click that every school intercom makes, the one that's been conditioning students to look up from their work for generations. Even now, even as an adult, even at 11:47 at night alone in an empty corridor, my head came up reflexively. Some conditioning runs too deep to be rational about. Then a voice. It was a woman's voice, recorded. I understood immediately that it was recorded, not live. The quality was the first indicator. A faint thinness in the high register, a slight compression in the mid-range, the unmistakable texture of audio that has been stored and replayed rather than spoken in real time. The second indicator was the cadence. It had that specific practiced neutrality of a voice trained for public address, a voice that has been carefully sanded of anything that might be interpreted as either warmth or impatience, institutional, neutral. The voice of systems. It said, attendance, period 7, homeroom C, -12. And then it began reading names. I stood in the corridor with the mop handle in both hands and listened. The names came at a pace that can only be described as procedural, not rushed, not leisurely, but calibrated to the specific rhythm of taking attendance the way attendance has been taken in schools for 100 years. Each name had a pause after it, the pause where a student would say here or present or simply raise a hand. The pause was always the same length, exactly the same length, long enough for a response, not long enough to feel like waiting. I counted 14 names that first night before the intercom clicked off. I stood in the corridor for a moment afterward, in the sudden silence, which felt, in the way that silences after sounds often do, louder than the sound itself had been. Then I finished mopping the corridor. I put the mop back on the cart. I moved to the next section and continued working. I told myself it was probably a scheduling system that hadn't been properly disabled, some administrative automation left running on a server, calibrated to the school's daily bell schedule, calling attendance to an empty building because nobody had thought to turn it off. It was, I told myself, exactly the kind of thing that happened in large institutional buildings with complicated legacy technology. Nobody's job to fix it. Nobody's job to notice. I believed this completely, and I moved on. The second night, that was the Tuesday, my regular schedule resuming it, happened again at the same time. 11:47. The click, the recorded voice, the names. I was in a different part of the building, the A wing near the main office, and the sound came through the intercom mounted above the trophy case. The one with the reflection problem. I stopped. I listened more carefully this time. The same woman's voice, the same calibrated cadence, a different homeroom number, different names. I recognized none of them from any student I'd seen in the building. During the transition overlap, the 45 minutes between when the after-school programs wound down and when my shift officially began. I didn't know many students' names, admittedly, but I noticed that the names felt slightly old, in a way I couldn't precisely articulate at the time. Not old-fashioned, exactly. Not names from another century, but names from a specific generation I couldn't quite place as current. Names like you'd find in a yearbook from 15 or 20 years ago. On Wednesday, I asked Gerald about it. He was pushing his cart towards the gym storage room, 10 minutes before his usual departure, and I caught him at the intersection of the B and C wings, where the hallways met at a kind of blind angle that always made that particular corner feel like a waiting room. I asked him if he knew about the PA system going off at night. He looked at me for a moment. Not a long moment, not a suspicious one, just the look of a man briefly consulting some interior catalog. Old scheduling system, he said. Does it happen every night? Most nights. He nodded once, conclusively, the way he nodded at most things, as if nodding were a form of closing a subject rather than opening one. They know about it in the office. Does it bother you? He picked up his cart handle. I'm in the gym by then, he said, and left. This was, in retrospect, not an answer to the question I had asked. By the end of my second week, I had established, through the specific attention to pattern that comes with working alone in a large building for long hours, the following. The PA system activated every night between 11:45 and midnight, always within that window, never outside it. It always called attendance for a specific homeroom and period. The homerooms were in the C wing, which was the oldest section of the building, the original 1971 construction, before the A and B wings were added in the late 80s. The voice was always the same recorded voice. The pause after each name was always exactly the same duration. On the 14th night, I brought a small notebook. I stood beneath the intercom in C wing, and I wrote down the names, all of them, in sequence. There were 16 names that night. When I was done, I folded the notebook and put it in my shirt pocket and finished my shift without thinking much about it. When I got home at 2:30 in the morning, I put the notebook on my kitchen table and made tea and looked at the list of names and felt, for the first time, something I hadn't expected to feel. Not fear exactly, not yet, something closer to recognition, the faint irrational sense that these names were not random, that they belonged together in some way that I didn't yet have the information to understand. I went to bed. I lay awake for an hour thinking about institutional systems and what happens when they outlive their original function. I thought about the ventilation hum. I thought about the exit signs burning red in empty corridors for no one. Eventually, I slept. The records room is in the basement of the A-wing, through a door marked Administrative Storage Authorized Personnel Only, which I had access to because my key card was issued as a blanket facility pass. The door was not guarded. There was a sign on it. There is almost always just a sign. I want to be honest about why I went there. It was not fear. It was still, at that point, a professional kind of curiosity, the same low-grade instinct that makes you look up a strange sound rather than away from it, the investigative impulse that most people have and most people know better than to follow too far. I had a list of names. I had access to a records room. I told myself I was simply being thorough, the way thorough people are. I went on a Thursday during the last hour of my shift, when the building was as settled as it ever got, when the ventilation ran at its low overnight frequency and the hallways were at their most perfectly empty. I brought my flashlight, even though the records room had functioning fluorescent lighting, because I wanted the option of darkness if I heard the door at the top of the stairs. The room was exactly what institutional records rooms always are. Metal shelving units floor to ceiling, cardboard archival boxes, file folders in colors that had faded from their original designation to something more uniformly beige, a folding table along one wall, a chair that had been left at an angle suggesting someone had stood from it in a hurry once and nobody had ever straightened it. The fluorescent light above flickered at the far end of the room, not dramatically, but consistently, a 3-second rhythm of faint dimming that I clocked after 30 seconds and thereafter ignored. The files were organized by academic year. Each box was labeled with a range: 2003 to 2004, 2004 to 2005, and so on. They went back to the building's original year of operation, 1971. The older boxes in a separate section marked with shelf tags that had been handwritten rather than printed, which meant they predated whatever labeling system had eventually been standardized. I found the year I was looking for based on the names. It was not difficult. The names I had written down had a generational cohort to them that was evident once I started looking. I pulled a box labeled 1998 to 1999, Homeroom Enrollment Records, C Wing. The files inside were accordion organized by homeroom designation. I found C12 after about 2 minutes of careful leafing. Period 7, Homeroom C-12, 1998 to 99. The enrollment list was there, typed on a standard form with the school's old letterhead, a letterhead that used a different logo than the current one, the pre-renovation logo with the falcon facing left instead of right. 16 names. I set my notebook beside the form and began comparing. 14 of the 16 matched exactly. 2 names on the PA list were not on the original enrollment record. I went back to the box. I checked the adjacent files, thinking perhaps there had been additions to the homeroom mid-year, late enrollment, the kind of administrative shuffling that happened with transfer students. I found nothing that accounted for those 2 names. I checked the student roster for the full 1998 to 1999 school year, a broader compilation that covered all homerooms. One of the 2 additional names appeared there, listed as a transfer student, mid-year, with a notation in the margin that said, withdrawn January 1999. Just the word withdrawn. No further detail. The second name appeared nowhere in the 1998 to 1999 records, or the 1997 to 1998 records, or the 1999 to 2000 records. I checked my notebook. I had written the name clearly. I was not misremembering it. The name was Caleb Voss. I did not know what that meant. I closed the files carefully and replaced them in the box and put the box back on the shelf and turned off the records room light and went upstairs and finished my shift. On my way out, I stopped in front of the trophy case and looked at my reflection in the glass. The exit signs were burning red behind me. The ventilation was running. The building was operating as it always operated, with complete institutional indifference to whether I was in it or not. I went home. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open to the page with the names, and I looked at the name Caleb Voss for a long time. Then I wrote beside it, in small letters that felt almost involuntary, "Not enrolled." I started timing the announcements more precisely. Not because I was afraid of them, that's still not the word I would have used at that stage. I was attending to them the way you attend to something that doesn't fit the pattern you expected. I had been operating on the assumption that the BA system was running an old scheduling loop, a ghost program cycling through archived data. That still seemed plausible. But the two discrepant names nagged at the underside of my attention the way a loose thread nags not urgently, not painfully, but persistently. The announcement always came at 11:47, always exactly. I confirmed this over several consecutive nights with my phone clock, which I started holding in my hand during the last half hour of each shift. The consistency was, in itself, strange, not in the way of supernatural strangeness, but in the way of engineered precision. The ventilation cycled at irregular intervals. The security lights came on at slightly different times, depending on which sensor triggered them. But the PA system at 11:47 was as reliable as a heartbeat. On the 19th night, I noticed something new. I had been standing in C-Wing, close enough to classroom C12 to see the door from where I stood. I was mopping the far end of the corridor, and the announcement began, and I found myself watching the door. Not for any particular reason, just watching it, the way your eyes go to a light that's been turned on in a house you thought was empty. The announcement moved through the names. The pause after each one, that consistent measured pause, and then on the 8th name, a name I'd recorded as Renner, Patricia. The pause lasted longer. I noticed it. I measured it against the previous pauses without consciously deciding to. The way your brain measures rhythm without being asked. The way you notice a skipped beat in music. The pause was not dramatically longer, maybe 3 seconds instead of the usual 1.5. But it was different. The voice moved on without comment. The rest of the names came at the standard interval. The announcement ended. The intercom clicked off. I stood with my mop for a long time afterward. I told myself, recording artifacts, old audio degrading at specific points, magnetic tape if the system was old enough, developing inconsistencies over decades of playback. This was reasonable. This was the most reasonable explanation available. I mopped C12's doorway last that night. As I moved the mop across the threshold, just the threshold, the door was locked. I had no reason or inclination to go inside. I noticed the floor on my side of the door The linoleum was clean, the way I'd left it 3 nights ago when I'd last mopped this corridor. But on the inside edge of the threshold, just at the door's sweep, there were marks in the dust that had settled there. Not footprints, not precisely, just disturbances. Small ones, the kind of irregular disturbance pattern that could have been caused by anything air current from the ventilation duct above, vibration from a distant HVAC unit, the weight of my own mopping nearby. I mopped them away and went home. The next morning, I was awake by 9. Having slept poorly, I searched the name Caleb Voss in combination with the name of the school. I did this on my phone, sitting at my kitchen table, with the notebook open beside me and the tea going cold. The search returned 2 results of any substance. The first was a cached version of an old local newspaper page, partially rendered, the kind of thing that exists in search results, like a geological stratum, a record of something that once had more presence and has since been reduced to fragments. The headline was partially visible. Search continues, 4, and then a gap in the rendering. Hargrove student, and then the date, which was March 2000. The second result was a PDF, apparently from a county public safety archive, which would not load. I tried 3 times. The URL gave me a 403 error each time, not 404, not found, but 403, forbidden. I wrote March 2000 in my notebook below the name. I sat with that for a while. Then I got up and made breakfast and tried not to think about the extended pause on Renner, Patricia, and largely failed. I broke my own unspoken rule about Gerald 3 weeks after I started. He was finishing his card on a Wednesday, earlier than usual, and I caught him at the east entrance where he always exited. He held the door for me briefly. When he saw me coming down the hallway, which was the most hospitable thing he'd ever done, and I took it as an opportunity. I told him I'd been looking into the PA records. I told him about the names, about the homeroom, about Caleb Voss. He didn't stop moving exactly, but he slowed. The door was propped against his back, and cold October air was coming in from the parking lot, and he looked at me the way someone looks at you when they're making a quiet decision about how much to say. "You looked in the records room," he said. "Yes." "Denise know you're doing that?" "I haven't mentioned it." He nodded. He did the thing with the nod that closed a subject. Then he seemed to reconsider, which was unusual enough that it felt like watching a door I thought was locked slowly swing inward. "There was a thing," he said, "in 2000. With one of the kids. He said it the way people say things they've practiced not thinking about." "What kind of thing?" I asked. "The kind the school settled out of." He adjusted his grip on the card handle. "Administration goes through, lawyers, everyone signs something, then the system runs and you just..." He stopped, started again. "You just let it run. Why haven't they turned it off?" He looked at me steadily for 3 seconds. 3 full seconds, which was the longest amount of time Gerald had ever looked directly at me. "Who would turn it off?" he said. Then he went out into the parking lot, and the door swung closed behind him, and the magnetic seal caught, and I was alone in the hallway with the fluorescent lights and the ventilation hum. and the feeling that I had received the most complete answer available and that it was nowhere near sufficient. This was 4 weeks in. By now, I had internalized the 1147 announcement the way you internalize any recurring event in your environment, not with fear exactly, but with a low habitual tension in the minutes approaching it, a tightening in the chest that I'd learned to interpret not as dread, but as the body's version of attention. I would stop what I was doing at roughly 11:45 and find a spot in C-Wing. Not always the same spot, but always somewhere in that corridor. And I would listen. I told myself this was research, methodical listening, documentation. I had, by this point, recorded 37 consecutive nights of attendance calls in my notebook. The homerooms varied, sometimes C12, sometimes C8, once C15. But they were always in C-Wing, always period 7, always the same woman's voice with the same cadence and the same measured pause. I had cross-referenced every name I could against the records room files. All but 3 appeared in the 1998 to 1999 enrollment records. The 3 that didn't, including Caleb Voss, I had designated in my notebook with a small asterisk. On the 37th night, a name I had never heard before was added to the list. I noticed it immediately because I had, by this point, committed the names to a kind of involuntary memory. Not deliberately, but the way any frequently repeated sequence becomes installed in the brain. The list had a shape to it, a sound, and I knew when something was different, the way you know when a word in a familiar sentence has been replaced. The new name came forth in the sequence between 2 names I recognized. It was a girl's name. I won't write it here in the final version of what I'm saying. I'll call her D. The voice read D's name with the same inflection it read every name, the same neutral precision. The pause came, and I counted it. 1.5 seconds. Exactly standard. The list continued. I wrote the name in my notebook and underlined it twice, and then stared at the wall until the list finished and the intercom clicked off. The next morning, I went back to the records room. Dee's name was not in any enrollment record I could find, not for 1998 to 1999, not for any year within a 5-year range, not in the transfer files, not in the withdrawal files, not in any homeroom list for C-Wing. I went upstairs. I sat in the empty cafeteria. It was 11:30 and the building was dead quiet. The rain that had been coming and going all week was coming again against the high cafeteria windows, and I thought about what it meant for a name to be added to a list that had been running for over 20 years. I thought about the 403 error on the county safety PDF. I thought about what Gerald had said. Who would turn it off? I thought about the word settled. I went back to the records room one more time that day, and I pulled every C-Wing period 7 file I could find. I spread them on the folding table. I looked at them for a long time, and then I noticed something I had missed on every previous visit, because I had been looking at names rather than at the forms themselves. Each enrollment form there were 9 of them, covering different homeroom period combinations in C-Wing across multiple years, had a column at the right-hand margin. The column header was standard, status. The status entries were standard, enrolled, transferred, withdrawn, graduated. But on the 1998 to 1999 C12 form, 6 of the 16 entries in the status column had been altered, not typed over. not corrected, with administrative notation, altered by hand with a pen in the small, neat handwriting of someone who was making changes and was not particularly worried about being discovered because they had already decided this was a matter of institutional record keeping rather than concealment. The status for 6 names, including the name Caleb Voss, which had been added in the same hand below the typed list, without an enrollment date or ID number, had been changed to a word I had to lean close to read. The word was present. I need to be careful here about how I describe what I heard, because I'm aware of how sleep deprivation affects auditory perception, and I am aware that awareness of this does not fully neutralize the effect. By week 5 of the overnight shifts, I was sleeping approximately 5 hours a night in 2 uneven blocks, and the quality of those hours was declining in ways I attributed at the time to ordinary adjustment, and now attribute to something closer to sustained low-grade fear that had embedded itself deeply enough in my body to affect rest without quite surfacing as conscious anxiety. I was functional. I was doing my job correctly, I believe. I was eating. I was, as far as I could determine, rationally intact. But I want to be honest that I was also not operating at full capacity, and that this bears on what I am about to describe. After the 11:47 announcement on the night of D's first inclusion, the 37th night, the night I found the word present in the records, I was mopping the C-wing corridor, as I often was at that hour, positioned maybe 40 feet from the door of C-12. The announcement ended. The intercom clicked off, and then I heard from somewhere further down the corridor, from the direction of the older classrooms, the ones whose windows faced the back of the property, where the track and the staff parking lot were footsteps. Not dramatic footsteps, not running, not heavy, the kind of unhurried step you associate with someone walking a familiar route without any particular destination urgency. A student walking to class. The sound was muffled enough by the distance and the corridor acoustics that I could not determine with certainty whether it was footsteps or some artifact of the building, a pipe settling, a locker door vibrating in its frame from some distant mechanical disturbance, the way old buildings convert physical stress into sound. I stood still and listened. The sound lasted approximately 15 seconds. Then it stopped. I mopped the rest of the corridor quickly. I did not look at the security monitors for the rest of that shift, which was a decision I made without consciously making it, the way you make certain decisions. On the way out, I looked. One camera, positioned to cover the full length of C-Wing, from the trophy case end to the emergency exit at the far end. The monitor showed the corridor empty, as it always showed the corridor empty. The fluorescent lights ran their slightly flickering course. The lockers stood in their orderly rows. The door of C-12 was closed. There was something on the floor in front of C-12 that the camera resolution made difficult to interpret. The monitor was a small, aging unit, the image slightly compressed and not especially sharp. What I saw could have been shadow variation from the fluorescent flicker, could have been the mop water I'd left drying on the linoleum, could have been any of several dozen innocent explanations. What it looked like from that distance, through that resolution, in that quality of image, what it looked like was a small, wet footprint. I did not go back down the corridor to check. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table. I did not open my notebook. I sat there until the sky outside lightened, and then I went to bed, and I lay on my back with my eyes open for a while, and then I was asleep. I went to the main office on a Thursday afternoon, 2 hours before my shift started. I asked to speak with Denise. She received me at her desk with the efficient warmth and read me over the top of her glasses with an expression that was pleasant in the way that long practice makes pleasantness possible, independent of feeling. I told her I had some questions about the PA system. She said, the scheduling system? The fact that she already had a name for it, the scheduling system, told me something. You name things that have been previously discussed. You name things that have been categorized, processed, assigned to a file. I said yes. I said I was curious about the after-hours announcements, the ones that ran close to midnight. I said I'd noticed they seemed to be pulling from old records from the late 90s. Denise nodded. Her expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A small repositioning, the way someone shifts weight when they've been standing in one place too long. It's a legacy system, she said, from the original building management installation. It runs on an old loop that's integrated with the HVAC scheduling. They were bundled in the original 1990s installation, which makes them complicated to separate without an expensive full panel overhaul. She said this evenly and completely, like someone reading from a prepared text. Not hostile, not evasive, just reciting. The names it calls, I said. Some of them don't appear in any enrollment records I've found. A pause. The records from that period are incomplete. There was a data migration issue when we moved to the current system in 2007. Some student records weren't fully transferred. What about the name Caleb Voss? I can't find any enrollment record for him at all. Denise took her glasses off. She set them on the desk with the care you give to fragile things. She looked at me without them, which made her expression harder to read. Where did you hear that name? She asked. Her voice was still calm, still professionally calibrated. The PA system called it, I said. She put her glasses back on. She straightened a paper on her desk that didn't need straightening. I'll look into the technical issue, she said, with the tone of someone closing a meeting. Thank you for flagging it. Can you tell me? Thank you for flagging it, she said again. I went back out into the hallway. The trophy case caught my reflection and threw it back. I stood looking at it for a moment, at my own face, slightly distorted in the convex glass, surrounded by the framed photographs of championship teams and academic award winners from decades I hadn't witnessed. Faces smiling in that specific way. People smile for institutional photographs, aware of posterity, performing some version of their best selves for a camera and a record that would outlast the moment by years. I found, in the bottom right corner of the case, behind a small cross-country trophy from 1999, a photograph I hadn't noticed in 6 weeks of walking past this case every night. It was a class photograph, small, the kind that gets donated to the school or submitted for display as a kind of civic gesture. The label at the bottom read C Wing Homeroom, 1998 to 99. 18 students and a teacher arranged in the standard 2-row formation. The front row seated, the back row standing. Taken in the gymnasium with the plain grey backdrop schools always used. I looked at the faces for a long time. I was not going to be able to identify anyone by name from a photograph of teenagers taken 27 years ago. But I counted them carefully. 18 students in the photograph. I had, in the enrollment file, a list of 16 names, 14 matching the PA list, 2 additional. In the photograph, there were 18 students. I stood in front of the case for a long time. Then I went and started my shift. I hadn't been looking for it specifically. I had been in the records room for other reasons, legitimate custodial reasons, I want to be clear. Retrieving some maintenance logs from 2019 that the facilities manager had requested for a licensing review. Routine. The kind of task that requires you to be in the room, but not particularly to attend to it. I found it because I pulled the wrong box. The box I pulled was labeled 2023 to 2024, student withdrawal records. I opened it, expecting maintenance logs. I found withdrawal forms, the standard administrative document filed when a student leaves the district, transfers, or otherwise ceases to be enrolled. I began to put the box back, and then I saw the tab that was sticking up slightly from the others, a hanging folder that hadn't been pushed fully into the box, its colored plastic tab protruding half an inch above the others. The name on the tab was Dee's name. I pulled the folder. Inside was a single form, a withdrawal record dated 7 months ago, mid-October. The reason field said family relocation. The status field said withdrawn, 7 months ago, mid-October, the month I had started. My first shift had been a Thursday in October. Dee's name had been added to the PA list on the 37th night, the night I found the word present in the 1998 to 1999 records, the night I heard the footsteps. I stood in the records room with the folder in my hands. The fluorescent light at the far end did its 3-second cycle. The rain on the high basement window was barely audible, a small, persistent sound, like counting. I put the folder back. I put the box back. I went upstairs and finished retrieving the maintenance logs and delivered them to the facilities manager's inbox and finished my shift. On the way out, I looked at the security monitor for C-Wing. I looked at it for a long time. The corridor was empty, as it always was. In front of C-12, I could see this is not ambiguous to me. This is not a resolution artifact. I know what I saw. Someone had placed a chair, just one chair, pulled out into the corridor from what I had to assume was the classroom itself, because all the chairs in this school were the same, the plastic-seated, institutional kind that had been standard since the building opened. And this one was sitting in the corridor in front of C12, facing outward down the hall, as if someone had recently gotten up from it. The door of C12 was open. I had mocked C-Wing 2 hours earlier. I had checked that door. I had tested the handle. It was locked. I did not go back down the corridor. I initialed the security log. I went home. This is what I want to be honest about, because I think the kind of person who would tell this story owes the people listening a full accounting of their own reliability. I have been at this job for 3 months, and I have been sleeping 5 hours a night in irregular blocks, and I have been spending a significant portion of my working hours in a state of sustained low-grade alertness that has a cumulative physical cost that I can feel in the back of my eyes and in the specific exhausted quality of my thoughts by 11 at night. I'm a reliable person. I believe myself to be a reliable person, but I am aware that there is a version of all of this, the records, the footsteps, the chair, Dee's name, the word present, that has a complete rational explanation that I am not equipped to find from the position I'm in. Sleep deprived, isolated, working in an old building at night with an overactive attention to pattern. I'm aware of this. I hold it alongside everything else. I keep coming back to the chair. I keep coming back to the word present in 6 different handwritten status fields on a form that was typed in 1999. I keep coming back to Dee's withdrawal date and my start date and the specific night her name first appeared on the list. Last week, I looked up the article fragment I'd found online. The search continues headline from March 2000. I tried a different search approach, combining the school name with that date range and the word missing. I found a fuller cached version of the article, enough to read the first 3 paragraphs. It was about a student, a boy, 15 years old, last seen leaving the school after a late February afternoon. The search had been ongoing for 3 weeks when the article was published. His name wasn't in the headline of this version of the article, but it was in the first paragraph. I don't need to write it here. I went to the trophy case the next day before my shift. I took my phone out and I photographed the class picture, the homeroom photograph from 1998 to 99, the one with 18 students instead of 16. I enlarged the photograph on my screen and I looked at the faces. In the back row, 3rd from the left, there is a boy with his hands in his sweatshirt pocket and an expression that is something between a smile and the effort of holding still. He is maybe 15. He is looking slightly to the left of the camera, the way some people do looking at someone just outside the frame, someone the photograph didn't include. I don't know what I expected to feel looking at him. What I felt was something ordinary and terrible, the kind of feeling that has no dramatic name because it's too common and too quiet for drama. Just the weight of understanding that this person existed in this corridor, maybe walked past the exact square of linoleum I mop every Thursday, sat in one of the plastic chairs that are still there, stacked at the back of C12, that they had a life that was accumulated the way all lives are accumulated, in small daily institutional moments, in hallways and cafeterias and homerooms at 11:47 in the morning, with their name called and their voice raised to say here, and that the accumulation stopped at 15 in a way that has never been fully accounted for, and that the only record still actively running in this building is a loop of audio that calls his name every night and waits for him to answer. I work my shift. At 11:47, I stand somewhere in C-Wing and I listen. The names come in their sequence. The pauses follow in their precise calibration. The building around them holds its operational hum, the ventilation, the exit signs, the security lights, the rain. I have stopped expecting anything to change. Not because I believe nothing will, because I understand more fully than I did 3 months ago that this is not the kind of thing that changes. This is the kind of thing that continues. This is what institutions do with the things they cannot resolve. They do not resolve them. They assign them a time slot. They normalize them into the schedule. They give them a procedural form that everyone can recognize and no one has to examine too closely, because examination is expensive and painful and ongoing, whereas scheduling is free and neat and can be left to run itself. The system calls attendance. It has been calling attendance for over 20 years. Someone added Dee's name. I do not know how. I do not know what mechanism, administrative or otherwise, governs the list, or who maintains it, or whether maintain is even the right word for what is happening to it. I do know that when I photographed the enrollment form on my last visit to the records room, the word present appeared in 7 status fields, not 6, 7. I checked my original notes. 6. I had written 6, clearly. On the night I first found it, I looked at the 7th name for a long time. It was mine. Epilogue. The schedule. I gave my notice last week. Denise processed it with the efficient warmth and told me my final paycheck would be mailed to the address on file and that I should return my key card to the facilities office before my last shift. She did not ask me why I was leaving. I am writing this from my kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon, 3 days before my last scheduled shift. The notebook is open beside me. The names are there, 42 nights of them, written in my own handwriting in blue ink on lined pages. I've been looking at them for an hour, not reading them exactly, not processing them in the way that yields new information, just looking. The way, Shin, you look at something to confirm it's still there, that it's real, that the weight of it in your hands is an actual weight and not something your tired mind manufactured in the fluorescent lit corridors of an old building at midnight. I have not been back to the records room since finding my name in the status column. I have finished my remaining shifts efficiently and without incident. Mop the corridors, check the bathrooms, initial the security log, go home. At 11:47, I stand in C-Wing and I listen and I write the names in the notebook and I leave. I don't know what I expected to find when I started all of this. I think I expected an explanation. The comfortable resolution of a technical glitch identified and reported, a legacy system updated or overwritten, a rational accounting of why an old recording runs in an empty building in the middle of the night. I expected, fundamentally, that the world would yield to the kind of sustained attention I was giving it. That investigation produces answers, that institutions, when pressed, produce explanations. I know better now. I know that Denise will hire someone to replace me. There will be a job listing evening custodial maintenance with the specific hours and the accurate description of the multi-building facility. Someone will answer it. They will start on a Tuesday or a Thursday and spend their first nights learning the floor plan and the mop catch points and the reflection problem in the trophy case. And at 11:47, they will stop and look up, the way you do, the way you always do when the PA system clicks on. The voice will begin, steady, calibrated, patient in the way that recorded things are patient, not because they wait, but because time simply does not affect them. The names will come in their sequence. And somewhere in the list, in the measured procedural rhythm of an attendance roll that has been running for over 20 years, a new name will eventually appear. I don't know whose. I know how it works now. I know that the list changes when someone leaves, when someone is new, when someone starts to pay attention in the specific way that attending to something, night after night, alone in a fluorescent lit corridor, in the hours when the rest of the world is asleep, constitutes a kind of presence that the system, whatever the system is, recognizes, and records. I am leaving on Wednesday. I will return my keycard. I will take my notebook home. I will sleep, eventually, in a way that isn't interrupted by the sound of names being called into empty hallways at 11:47 at night. But I am aware, and this is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I am still trying to decide how to hold, that my name is in a records room in a basement in an old school building, written in a status column in small, neat handwriting, and that the status it has been given is the one word on that form that carries no institutional explanation, no qualifying notation, no forwarding address or date of transfer, just the word present. And from somewhere in the building, in the hallways that no longer walk, in the classrooms that are empty and locked, in the place where a boy looked just left of the camera at someone just outside the frame, the attendance continues.